Hello everyone, welcome to Jury's Journey, NCA Triumph and Canadian Law. So today in this video, we are going to talk about NCA Canadian Constitution Law. So earlier, I have already uploaded a demo lecture on criminal law. So many students have requested me to upload a demo lecture on constitutional law as well. So I am here with constitutional laws demo lecture. So now let's begin. Before moving with our lecture, I would like to humbly request you all kindly subscribe to this channel and support me. So before moving with our demo lecture, firstly, let's look into the syllabus. So the topics that we have to cover. So first one, basic concept, and it covers sources from where the constitution has come from, the nature of the constitution, then amending procedures. So how can we amend any particular part of our constitution? Then legislative parts, who can make law, whether federal government, whether provincial government, and this particular part too is very important. You are definitely gonna get a question on this one. So federalism, judicial review, then principles of interpretation, which we apply in our analysis here and there. So this is again important. Then property and civil rights, which government has control on this subject, then which government has control over trade and commerce, peace, order and good governance, again very interesting and one of my favorite topics. Then criminal law, very simple. If you're already done with criminal law exam, then this you might find repetitive because it's almost similar to that only. Then ancillary powers, paramountcy, interjurisdictional immunity. So in examination, sometimes what they do is like these 2-3 things, paramountcy, interjurisdictional immunity, these come together in one question in a blended form. Third part, aboriginal rights and the constitution, must part. One question, 100% from this part, whether like short kind of 10 marks, 30 marks. So even you can get 2 questions. Like when I wrote NCA constitutional law exam, I got 2 questions from this particular part only. So one question was related to equality rights and aboriginal rights, and one was straight away from aboriginal rights. So part 3, introduction, aboriginal rights, title, treaty right, duty to consult. These cases sometimes they directly give you proposition based on the facts of one of these cases. So whatever cases are mentioned in the syllabus, you have to be thorough with those cases. Part 4, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, interpretation, application, then override, freedom of conscience and religion. Now from here, if you are from India, so from this particular topic you might find few similarities with Indian constitution. So this would be like easy for you. Again, freedom of expression, life, liberty, security. So this is somewhat related to criminal law. So again, you might find this little bit repetitive here. Then equality rights. So this is again one topic. I think I earlier told you peace, good governance, and second favorite topic of mine is equality rights, because the cases are really interesting, especially the Andrews versus Law Society of British Columbia case, for which I am truly grateful. Then limitation of rights, remedies. Here we are going to end with 25th topic. The syllabus ends here. The details of every single word of the syllabus will be discussed in our course. So now let's move further with our demo lecture. So I have chosen a very simple and one of my most favorite topic. So that is equality rights under Canadian law for this demo lecture. So that you don't get confused, you will get an idea as how I'm going to teach in the course, as well as this concept will give you a little confidence for this constitutional law subject. So let's start now. So when we get to know about the equality rights under Canadian law, the first thing that you have to keep in your mind is where are these equality rights talked about. So in Canadian law, under the Constitution, we have 2 sources from where equality rights comes from. So number 1, Canadian Bill of Rights. So it's mentioned here. Section 1B of Canadian Bill of Rights guarantees equality before law. So everyone will be getting equal rights if that person is on Canadian land. So what's the scope? So this Canadian Bill of Rights Equality Rights only applies to federal parliament. But here you have to note down one important historical thing, that regarding to this particular source, Canadian Bill of Rights Section 1B on 17th April 1985, this had been superseded by Section 15, which we are going to talk about in next slide. So Section 15 under the Charter of Rights and Freedom. So this section has superseded this particular Section 1B Canadian Bill of Rights. So now this is almost like a redundant section. So we don't go to Section 1B if somebody's equality rights have been infringed. So where do we go? We go to our next slide, Section 15. So Section 15, equality rights. Firstly, let's read this complete section word by word. Equality before law, equality before and under law, and equal protection and benefit of law. So Section 15 subsection 1 says every individual. So here you have to understand every single word. So individual, first important word, is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination. So all these ands, you have to keep these in your mind. So number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So here, how many equality rights this section is giving you? So this section is giving you 4 equality rights, and to whom? To any individual. So without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination, what are the grounds that are mentioned under Section 15 subsection 1? So those grounds are race, national, ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. So these are the grounds that are particularly mentioned under the section. So next is affirmative action program. So what is word affirmative means? So affirmative means here a supporting, hoping, or encouraging. So firstly, you should understand this title. So subsection 1 does not preclude any law. So we are talking about this section, subsection 1. Program or activity that has its object the amelioration of conditions of disadvantaged individuals or groups, including those that are disadvantaged. What are the reasons for their disadvantagement? Why are they vulnerable here? Because of race, national, ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. So what does word amelioration means? So amelioration means for the betterment. So when we do something for the betterment. So here I think you should have got an idea about what this section and these two subsections talks about. So this is how you have to go through a particular section, because section 15 equality right, this is very very important. Even when I wrote a constitution law exam, got question from this particular paragraph, affirmative action programs. So I knew what these words mean, what disadvantaged individual means. So I think I got question with regard to indigenous people, their rights related to art and craft. So there was a legislation that the government formulated, the federal government formulated in order to protect their art and rights. So that particular question was related to this section. So you have to go through every single word, every, I would say, grammatical things, where they have used and, where they have put in a comma, whether it's an inclusive list, exclusive list. So you have to go through, you must have good interpretation skills basically if you want to go through this constitutional law easily. So you must have those interpretation skill, and that you can only get if you try to read these word by word rather than just jumping straightly to the notes that you have of any tutor, just going through theory. Firstly, try to make yourself understand the main section, that's the main topic. So now, as I have told you earlier, so section 15 subsection 1 talks about four kinds of equality. So here, all these four equalities, the words and in the very first line of subsection 1 has made it clear. So equality before the law ensures individuals are treated equally by the law. Under the law means guaranteed individuals are subject to same law, same legislation for everyone. Then equal protection means if somebody's fundamental rights are getting infringed, then that person will get equal kind of protection. It's not that if you are a woman you won't get equal protection, if you are a man only then. So there's nothing like that. Provide individuals with the same level of legal protection. Then equal benefit means a surety that nobody can infringe your rights. Assure individual receive the same advantage from the law. So these are four kinds of equality that have been mentioned under subsection 1 of section 15 under constitutional law, Charter of Rights and Freedom. So here we have already read this. What are the grounds of discrimination? Then next, when we apply this law, so this is the main thing that you have to keep in your mind, because in the proposition in exam, you are going to get confused. So if you want to make things easier, if you want to, just read the proposition quickly and you want that you can understand the thing that have been asked, the main issue, without getting confused, then you have to understand the application upon whom the particular section applies. So for that, Section 15, as I told you, the very second word, every individual. So I highlighted that word for the reason because you have to keep in mind that this section only assures equality rights to individual, to human beings. Corporations, companies are not included. For example, in exam, if you are getting a question that whether ABC Limited, because sometimes you get MCQs, fill in the blanks, so you have to get ready for each and every type of question. It's not that you just go through notes and make up a mind that, okay, I'm going to get a, long theoretical question. It will be easier for me. No, NCA definitely gives you surprises here and there. So equality rights in section 15 are granted to an individual, meaning corporations are not included. So in exam, if you get whether ABC Limited can ask for equality rights, the answer is no. So second is law. So the court clarified that law in section 15 includes action taken under legal authority only. So here we are talking about particular legislation that passed through legislative assemblies, provinces, federal, depend upon the subject. Section 15 covered the same range of government action as other charter rights, private action. Now this is important because sometimes you get question about human rights, then human right codes. So you have to keep this in your mind that section 15 does not cover private discrimination. So if some employer is only hiring male employees, then who can protect? So section 15 cannot jump into that situation. Human right code in all Canadian jurisdiction prohibit private discrimination. So where will that person go? That person will go to human right code, sorry. So private discrimination in areas like employment, accommodation, services, like sometimes people have tenancy issues and things like that. So there you have to go to particular human right codes. Now, important thing, when you are talking about, when you are writing a proper answer, things that you have to mention are the grounds of discrimination. So under section 15, when we talk about grounds, there are two kinds of ground. The one that I told you are mentioned straightly, that are crystal clear from the section wording only. So those grounds are called enumerated ground. Then there are few other ground that comes from various case laws, or those are indirectly related to these enumerated grounds. So they come from these grounds only, but in an indirect form. So those grounds are known as analogous ground. So what are enumerated grounds? What are analogous ground? You have to mention the particular ground that has been asked in your proposition in your case. So personal characteristics that are immutable or difficult to change voluntarily, like race, nationality, ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability. So basically what they are trying to say here is that these are the grounds on which we don't have any control. We cannot change them. So you are no one to discriminate us on the grounds that are immutable. So the word immutable means unable to change. You cannot do anything about these grounds. So what are these grounds? Number one, your race. Statutes with racial distinctions may be upheld under certain conditions only if they are for affirmative action program, like I talked about under section 15 subsection 2, like special status of aboriginal people, the one that I told you, the similar kind of question I got in my constitutional exam. So that was from here, aboriginal people. Next is religion, prohibited by section 15, granted freedom of conscience. Religion by section 2A, cases involving Sunday observance law, religious exercises in public schools. So all these comes under religion. Sex, explicitly prescribed by section 15, cases like R versus Hess, then Symes versus Canada. Equality guaranteed equally to male and female persons under section 28. Ground of discrimination outlawed by section 15 is age. Distinction between age and other ground discussed with legal precedent, like Law versus Tetrol, Gidori versus Canada. So these are the cases. Mental or physical disability prohibited by section 15, again accommodations required under reasonable circumstances. Then we have important case. This is related to Aldrich versus British Columbia. So this case was related to some medical benefit plans, sign languages, interpretation under section 15, subsection 1. So this is one of the most important case. Whatever things I star mark, you cannot go to exam. You cannot just, write exam before going through these cases, because you have to mention these kind of star mark important things somewhere or the other, directly or indirectly. Next comes analogous grounds. Now you have to be very careful with these kind of ground, because these are easy. The words that are mentioned in the section itself, you can easily pick and choose that, okay, whether this relates to my case or not. But this is something like tricky. Grounds akin means similar to the listed grounds with characteristics that are immutable or changeable only at great cost of personal identity. So what does this mean? So these are not as, permanent characteristics as the listed ones. You can change them, but the cost is something which we can call unacceptable, unbearable, kind of like extraordinary loss you have to face to your personal identity if you want to change this. So we usually avoid. So marital status recognized as analogous ground, then sexual orientation determined as analogous ground. Citizenship, very, very important. Even I am glad that this case came out, Andrews versus Law Society, because here I am in British Columbia right now. If this case had not been there, I won't be able to, achieve my aim of becoming a lawyer in British Columbia till the time I don't get my citizenship. But now things have made easier because of this case. So now let's look into what this case talks about, because this case is directly mentioned in the syllabus and this is very, very important. So Andrews versus Law Society of British Columbia 1989 marked a significant milestone as the first section 15 case. So first section 15 case, note down this thing. to reach the Supreme Court of Canada. So before this case, nobody has ever faced any issue related to Section 15. So it contested British Columbia's statutory mandate requiring members of the bar to hold Canadian citizenship. So the court ruled that this requirement is discriminatory, is contrary to Section 15 and ineligible for the reasonable limit Oakes test under Section 1 that we'll be going to talk about in detail in our course. So discrimination as interpreted by courts entailed distinctions based on personal characteristics as we have discussed in last slide. So enumerated ground in Section 15(1) are not exhaustive. So as and when some issue comes to court and the court feels like, okay, that this is a valid ground and you cannot, do discrimination on this basis, so then they make it as an analogous ground. So the list that we have talked about, the listed grounds, enumerated grounds, that's not exhaustive. So there are many analogous grounds. So the term without discrimination goes beyond mere differentiation. It implies a limitation on distinction that result in prejudice or disadvantage to the complainant. So the Canadian law protects every individual who feels that his or her right has been infringed, there is some inequality, and that person is facing some kind of disadvantage. So the case established the Andrews two-part test. So what are the two-part tests? So number one, does the law establish a distinction? So based on enumerated and analogous ground, is there any difference? Then, does this distinction perpetuate prejudice and stereotyping, thereby creating a disadvantage? So we have to check these two things. We have to answer these two questions. If both say yes, if the answer of both these questions is yes, it means that there had been discrimination. So equality rights had been infringed. So the court concluded in this case basically that citizenship qualifies as an analogous ground of discrimination. Since this is only demo lecture, that is why I'm not going into too much detailing that we'll be discussing in our course. So here you have to keep in mind that citizenship qualifies as an analogous ground. So enumerated and analogous groups are not exclusive but encompass the most common and historically practiced biases of discrimination. Determining whether a characteristic qualify involves the assessing its immutability or changeability only at unacceptable personal cost. So this is basically just general meaning that was given at the end of this judgment. So now, Department of Justice, Government of Canada has beautifully shared two-part framework. Whenever you have to write an answer on Section 15, there are two-part frameworks that you have to analyze. So like this analysis means in your actual IRAC, the A which stands for analysis or application, there you have to follow this pattern. So Section 15(1) framework for analysis involved two steps that we have discussed in Andrew, the two questions. So the second question, the first one is straightforward. Does the law create any distinction based on enumerated or analogous grounds? So first we will check whether it's a mentioned ground or it's an indirect form of ground. Secondly, whether upon these grounds the complainant is facing any discrimination. Now, to answer this second question, there are four particular subtopics that we have to touch upon. So firstly, the discrimination, the disadvantage that we are talking about. Is that discrimination pre-existing? From how long? Stereotyping, then is there any prejudice, vulnerability, any risk experienced by the individual or group at issue? Secondly, we'll check the correspondence or lack thereof between grounds on which the claim is based and the actual need, merit, capability, circumstances of the claimant. Is the claimant actually facing any harm, any bias? Thirdly, we'll see the purpose, the effect. If we do away with that law, that impugned law, what would be the effects on more disadvantaged person or group in society. Then we'll talk about the nature and scope of the interest affected by the impugned law. So what's the nature? What's the scope of the interest? Interest means, like in Andrew's case, the person's bar entrance, the bar membership was getting affected. So we will be looking upon all those minute details, and then finally we'll decide whether there is actually a discrimination based on Section 15 or not. So this was basically the crux of this whole topic. So in detail, again, I'm saying that we'll be talking about in our course. So if you have any other query, you are free to reach out on this email, demystifycanadianlaw@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram, Jury's Journey NCA Triumph and Canadian Law page. So if you send me an email, kindly mention which exam you are targeting. So that's all for today. See you in next lecture. Please do like, share and comment, subscribe to my channel. As I always say, your support is my motivation. Thank you and have a good day.